Hey guys, this is Dr. Hub. In case you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to learn and grow daily. Now let's understand the muscle fibers and its anatomy. So before we move ahead, let's draw a diagram, and this will help in better understanding. So just follow. This is we call this the thick filament, and above it and below it there is a thin filament. So thick filament, thin filament, and now let's look at the zones. So thin filaments. So now let's look at the zones. So in between this is nothing but the H zone. Okay, and the entire unit of the thick filament, this is known as the A band. Next, moving on further, the entire zone, this is known as this is a unit of sarcomere, and the center line is the M line, and beyond this up to the next structure, it is the I band. This is nothing but I band. Now this will be a basis of our discussion. So let's minimize and put it on the side. So here the other a few diagrams we need to know is about the thick filament, the thin filament. So here, talking about the thin filament, what we need to know is there are some structures. So they may be actin, and there is the tyromycin, and also there is troponin. So these are the structures we need to know. Next, when we move on to the thick filament, here there is presence of here there is actin binding proteins, actin binding sites. Also the ATP binding sites are present. There is the flexible hinge region and the myosin molecule. There is flexible hinge region, as well as there is presence of the myosin molecules. There is myosin molecules. So these are some important diagrams based on which we will be discussing. So first is each muscle consists of numerous muscle fibers. So there are numerous muscle fibers. Each skeletal muscle is a multinucleated. So each skeletal muscle, it is nothing but it is multinucleated. So it is multinucleated. So each skeletal fibers, it is multinucleated, and it is bounded by a sarcolemma. So it is bounded. So this is bounded by the sarcolemma. So each skeletal muscle fibers is multinucleated and is bounded by a sarcolemma. It enclosing the sarcoplasm. So what it does, it encloses the sarcoplasm, and there are several hundreds of nuclei arranged in the periphery just beneath the sarcolemma. So there are hundreds of nuclei beneath the sarcolemma. The sarcoplasm, it also consists of evenly distributed longitudinal threads, and they are known as the myofibrils. So there are numerous longitudinal threads. Next is each myofibril. They contains the thick and the thin filaments and overlapping each other. So each myofibril. So there are each myofibril. So each myofibril, it contains a thick. The thick is known as a myosin. And then there is also the thin. The thin is known as the actin. So you have the thick and the thin, and thick is the myosin, and the thin is the actin filaments, and they overlap each other. So what it does is it overlaps each other. So the portion of the myofibril which contains the thick filament is known as the A band. So the portion of the myofibrils which contains the thick filament, so it contains a thick filament, and this is known as the A band or the dark band. And the portion of the myofibril between the two A bands, so between the two A bands, so we are calling this A band. So between the two A bands, we got the portion of myofibril between two A bands is known as the I band. So this is I band. So between two A's, we have the I. And thus the A band, it contains of both the thick and the thin filaments. So A band, it contains of both the thick and the thin filaments, thick plus the thin filaments, and where the I band, it contains only the thin filaments. So I band, it contains only the thin filaments. So in the middle of the A band, so in the middle of A band, so here in the middle of A band, there are only thick filaments. There are only thick filaments, and with no overlapping of the filaments, and this is known as the H zone. This is known as the H zone. And in the middle of the H zone, there is a dark band. It's known as the M band. Between the H zone, there is a dark band. In the middle of the H zone, this is known as a M band. The middle of the eye, there is a dark Z in between I band. In the middle of the I band, there is a dark Z disc. This is known as the cross membrane. The segment of the myofibril between the two Z discs are known as the sarcomere. So between the two Z discs, this is nothing but it is the sarcomere. To watch more videos like these and grow daily, subscribe to the Dr. Hub channel.